الرحمن علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان الشمس والقمر بحسبان والنجم والشجر يسجدان.
Assalamu alaikum, my friends. Welcome to another episode of the Revelation Experience. I'm Meraj Mohiuddin. Today we are going to be talking about Quran journaling. So this is something that I wanted to talk about before we actually dive into the surahs of the Quran. I wanted to give you a suggestion of something that really might help make this entire endeavor, this project, this Abu Bakr coaching plan, the ABC plan as we call it, a lot more powerful for you and efficient. And so what I'm going to suggest for you is to start a Quran journal. This is something that I have done several years in a row. Every year I restart a new Quran journal. And it's kind of building off the idea of bullet journaling, which is something that I have done in the past and found to be very helpful, and the idea of trying to connect with the Quran. Bullet journaling is this technique where you use a blank journal, like, a lot of times people use moleskin journals or so forth. The journal that I use tends to be about 5 inches wide, about 8 inches tall, so a nice notebook. And you basically customize it to your life so that you can achieve your daily goals, weekly goals, monthly goals, and yearly goals. And it's just a way of organizing your life with everything going on so that you can keep your appointments, keep track of your thoughts, track your goals, everything that is important to you in your life. You can prioritize, write down, and actually have this written record of how you're doing as you're proceeding through life. Well, that's a technique that I picked up several years ago, and I found it to be very helpful for me to organize my life, especially as life gets more complicated and you have all of these goals that you're trying to accomplish. Well, taking that idea, what happened is I started journaling in some of my Quran goals into my bullet journal, and that grew and grew and grew into what I started doing lately, which is just a separate Quran journal. And that's what I want to explain to you today, because I think that might be something that will help unlock a lot of the power, the transformational power of the Quran, and how it can have a power on your life. If we take a step back and look at the experience of what the Quran was like for the earliest companions, perhaps like someone like Sayyidina Abu Bakr, you have to realize that the Quran was not a book to them, right? When I say the word Quran, people think of a mushaf or a book, right? They think of their book, maybe it's wrapped in maroon leather with gold imprinting on it or something, typical like that. And we tend to have this idea of the Quran as this pre-printed book that sits on a nice shelf. Some of us access it more than others. But there's something impersonal about it, in the sense that it was printed in a factory, maybe in Malaysia or Saudi Arabia or Pakistan or somewhere else. It doesn't have our own feeling to it. It doesn't have a sense of personalization to it, right? People don't write in their Qur'ans and so forth. One of the things that I noticed as I was writing Revelation, especially when I was sitting in coffee shops doing research, writing, editing, and so forth, is how many people carry Bibles with them, where they personalize their Bibles. They're highlighting in them, they're writing notes in them, they have tabs sticking out the side and so forth. They have unique leather zip up cases with pencils in them and so forth. And there's a whole culture around I don't know what the right word is for it, but Bibling or exploring their Bible and so forth. We don't have that with the Quran. I think partially because, we want to respect the text, we want to write in the text and so forth, and I understand that. But what I also feel is that because of that, we tend to depersonalize the Quran, and we don't have a personal copy of the Quran for each one of us. The reason why I'm bringing this all up is because the earliest companions, if we're trying to model ourselves after their approach to the Quran, as I estimate it, they didn't have a book that they would just walk around with and treat with this ritual, ceremonious care. The Quran was in their heart, and the Quran was represented often by their actions or the manifestations of their behavior as affected by the Quran. The Quran was a much more personal thing to them that they held in their heart. If they said a surah, for example, if I mentioned, let's just pick any Meccan surah, let's say Surah Al-Taha, right? Surah Al-Taha is the story of Moses. When I say Surah Taha to people nowadays, they probably are thinking, the 20th chapter in the Qur'an, right? Well, there was no such thing as numbers back then. There was no 20th chapter. It wasn't compiled in that order at that time. Surah Taha to other people may have been a much more personal, deep connection. A companion might have said, oh, I remember when I was sitting in this place when Surah Taha was revealed. So for them, Surah Taha is really about a period of their life, not a chapter in a book. You could ask Sayyidina Umar, what does Surah Taha mean to you? And he would have a very profound response. He would say, those were the verses that I heard being recited in my sister's house, and then it finally hit me. So I guarantee you that Sayyidina Umar's reaction to the name Surah Taha, it will be very different than, oh, chapter 20 in the Qur'an. For him, it would be an emotional response, almost the way we feel about songs. You know, there are certain songs that maybe you've heard throughout your life that might remind you of certain periods of your life and evoke these very powerful emotional memories. In the same way, I believe that that's probably how the companions viewed the Quran. That was their personal experience with the Quran. And so I feel it's really important to personalize the Quranic experience for yourself so that the surahs have a meaning and an impact on you that goes beyond the academic approach to the text. And for that sake, I found that Quran journaling is a very powerful way to do that. It's a very powerful way to make the Quran your own because it's your own very journal, which is your own representation of what the Quran is saying to you. And secondly, and perhaps more powerfully, it gives you a way to create action. It gives you a way to think about the verses, jot down what you have to do to actualize these verses in your life, and then it keeps you accountable for whether you are actually acting on the guidance of the Quran or not. What do I mean by that? Well, let me explain to you how I set up my Quran journal. And if you're still listening to this series up to this point, that means that you guys have stayed strong. You're sincerely interested in trying to connect with the material, and I congratulate you for that. And I'm about to give you a gift, which I think will really help you as we move forward in this journey of diving into the surahs of the Quran. So what I would first recommend you do is to go out and purchase a journal. I tend to use like a moleskin journal that's about 5 inches by 8 inches, and I like to use journals that have a grid pattern on them, but you can choose what's beneficial for you. And what I do, I'll tell you how I set it up, is, the first page, I usually leave the first few pages blank in case I need to put something in there. The first page I leave blank because I kind of have that as a dedication page. And on the first page, I just like to create a running list of people who have had a huge influence on my life and people who I always want to remember as people who I'm grateful for having shaped me the way I am. So that would, for me personally, that would begin with my parents, my mom and my dad. It would include my siblings who've had an impact on me, and it would start including a lot of the teachers, the scholars who have really profoundly affected the direction of my life. And I think that's just really important because it's a reminder that, in many ways you're dedicating yourself to Allah, you're dedicating yourself to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, but it's very important to thank the people who have brought you to where you are today, and by thanking them, it's a means of thanking Allah. So I know it might sound a little bit hokey, but I actually think that's a really important thing to do, and it keeps everything that you're working on in perspective. So that was the first page, I guess. And so then I open it up to the first full page, the first full spread, I guess you would say. So that would be like page 2 and page 3. And that I would actually make a table of contents. So I would just dedicate those 2 pages to a table of contents, and I would just number all the lines going down the sides of the page. So you could say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and maybe go all the way up to 100. The next thing that you need to do is you actually need to number every single page of this journal. So maybe in the top right corner of every page, you just put a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and number the entire journal. I know this seems like a lot of work, but this is actually the part that personalizes it and makes it very powerful for you. So you're just going to have to trust me on that process. So you have this journal right now. I think we said on page 1 is kind of like a dedication or a remembrance page. The first next pages after that, I would keep as a table of contents, and I'll explain to you how that works. Then in maybe the 3rd or the 4th full spread is you draw the Quranic timeline in the middle of the page, going over both sides, the left and the right side of the paper, and you fill in the Quranic timeline as we discussed it in the previous episode. So you have a very clear view of all the 23 major events that happened in the seerah, so that you can always have that and refer to that, and you can add notes to it as you need to. Okay. Now, on the next open spread, what I would tell you to do on the left side of the page is write down all the early Meccan surahs in chronological order. And that's a list that I can put in the description below so that you can understand this is, not a perfect, but a generally agreed upon list of the surahs as they descended that would cover, the first 6 years of the Meccan period. Okay, so it will start with Surah Al-Alaq, then it would go to Surah Al-Qalam, Surah Al-Muzammil, then Surah Al-Mudaththir, and so forth and so forth. And I will try to include that list in the description below. Now that you have that done, go to the next full page, and now we're going to beginning our Qur'an journaling. Now, you don't have to follow exactly how I'm doing this, but I'm just kind of giving you a brief schematic of how I would plan out my Qur'an journal. Now, the general theme of the remaining pages of this book is that the left side of the page for every open spread, the left side is a side where you take notes and you add material that you want to learn or remind yourself about. So, what do I mean by that? If we start with Surah Al-Alaq, what I will do in the top left corner of the open spread is I will write Alaq. Okay, I'll write a number 1 next to that because that's the first in our chronological order. So I write 1 Alaq, and then next to it, I'll write the compiled order of that surah, just so it's easy for me to look it up quickly. So I'll write 96. And then after that, I'll start taking notes that only stay on the left side of the page on anything that I want to write about Surah Al-Alaq. Now, this could be stuff that you learned from this series. It could be stuff, it could begin with that, and then you can go read it and augment it and write other notes that I didn't include or I missed or so forth that you want to take from the scholars. You write all that stuff on the left side. The right side you leave blank, okay? If it only takes half the page, that's fine. Then you draw a line under that, and then you write number 2, and you write Qalam, and then write the number for Surah Al-Qalam there. And then you do the same thing. If you run out of space on that page, just flip the page. Don't write anything on the right side of the page. Just flip to the next spread, continue writing about Surah Al-Qalam. When you're done with that, draw a line under that, and then go number 3, Surah Al-Muzammil. Then you write the compiled order of that surah, and then you start taking notes on that. And that's all you're going to do, is you're going to go through, as you're listening to all of the episodes talking about every single surah, you're going to take notes on the major themes that I'm telling you about, okay? Now, what are we doing with the right side of the page? Well, the right side of the page is for you. The left side of the page is stuff that is information that you're gathering. The right side of the page is your action page. So let me just explain to you. Whenever you have a meeting, right, for those of you who love corporate meetings and so forth, right, it's really important, as you can imagine, to make an action list at the end of the meeting, right? The meetings where people are like, okay, that was a great meeting. Okay, I'll see you guys later. And no one comes up with a dedicated specific action plan. Those meetings are usually a complete waste of time because nothing really happens. People just talk and everyone forgets everything that happened. And I have found for myself that when you just read the Qur'an and not develop an action plan based on what you're reading, it just turns into entertainment. It just turns into a way to pass time or this academic exercise. Oh, I want to learn more. I want to learn more. But you're not transforming because of it. It's often like going to a gym, talking to the personal trainer. The personal trainer explains to you the perfect, way to do exercises. This is how you do push-ups. This is how you use this machine. This is how you lift weights and so forth. And you're just taking notes on the left side of the page. And then at the end of it, the personal trainer is like, okay, you ready to get started? And then you just walk out of the gym. And you say, oh, you know what, I'll see you tomorrow. And then you come back the next day with your journal and you just keep taking notes on what he's saying, but you never actually do any exercises. And then you're wondering why your life is always the same. I spend so much time at the gym and I do all these amazing copious notes and I know exactly how to do every single exercise. Well, then why are you out of shape still? Well, the reason you're out of shape is because you're not doing the homework. You're not doing the heavy lifting. And so the left side of the page is the guidance. The right side of the page is the heavy lifting. And that's the place of transformation. So what happens? What are the kinds of things that you write on the right side of the page? Let's say we're reading Surah Al-Ma'un. It's about small kindnesses. And Allah is saying, have you seen these people who pray to be seen in public, but they overlook just acts of small kindness?
فويل للمصلين الذين هم عن صلاتهم ساهون الذين هم يراءون ويمنعون الماعون.
So in that situation, you might write down on the left side of the page, oh, Surah Al-Ma'un, about small kindnesses and a warning to people who show off and hypocrisy and so forth. If you just left it like that, it's not really doing much for you. But if you go to the right side of the page, at the same level of that surah, and you make a box and say, what are some small acts of kindness that I can start this week? And then you make a list, brainstorm it with your family. That list could include checking on the elderly neighbor who lives across from me. That list could include asking my colleague at work who's been down lately what's on their mind and if there's anything I can do to help them. Small kindnesses could include inviting my friends over for dinner because it's been so long and we've all been growing apart. Small kindnesses could include X, Y, Z. It could go on and on and on. But make a list and make it a real, concrete, actionable list. So what you're doing as you're reading the Quran is you're doing this 3-step process. The 3 steps are, step 1, you read the Quran and write down the major themes. Okay, that goes on the left side of the page. Step 2 is you're extracting meaning from those surahs to create an action plan for your life. So that would be writing down the check boxes and the list of things that you feel that you can do to act on what you've learned in the Quran. And then step 3 is actually doing those things and then checking off those boxes. It's a very simple plan. Like, as you can imagine by now, I like to keep things very simple, right? So we have the ABC plan, and it's basically a 3-part process. You read the Quran, understand its context, study it, take notes on that, and so forth. Then you apply it to your life and brainstorm, reflect, think about how can I be there for other people, be conscientious in this thought process. And then step 3, go pick up some weights and do the exercise. And the beauty of Quran journaling to me is that there's this huge sense of accountability. You can look at a Quran journal and you can see how active you've been. Because if the right side of the page is completely empty, and I'll probably tell you, most students of knowledge, if they actually wrote down how they spend their time, the left side of the page will be full. The left side of the page will be full. The left side of the page, they have so many notes and amazing. And oh, did you hear about this hadith? And this agrees with this hadith over here. And this is Sahih Bukhari. And this is this. And this is a little bit of a weaker narration. And then, oh, look at this root word of the Arabic. And they're so into the academics of it. That's all stuff that goes on the left side of the page. It's all left page work. But if you actually look at what they're working on, the right side of the page is completely blank. Page after page after page after page after page, it's completely blank. And that's an imbalance where the left side is heavy and the right side is empty. That means that we're just studying the academics of what it means to be a Muslim, but we're not doing any of the actual work. That means like we're just going to the gym. We're just kind of following the personal trainer around because we like to spend time with them, and being around them makes us feel healthy, but we're not doing anything that they're saying, and we're just developing a gut. But we're smart, we know how to work out, but no one's actually being transformed by this. And we have to be a community of transformation. This was the Prophet, peace be upon him's entire mission, was to transform us. And so that's why if you do this, there's a huge sense of accountability. Because if you're looking at your pages and you don't have much written on the right side of your page, that means perhaps you're not reflecting as much on the Quran as you're meant to. Because anything that comes in the Quran, there should be a way or a means for us to apply that to our lives. So anything that you write on the left, there should be something that we can write on the right for that. So just by looking at your journal, you can see, am I really digging deep into the Quran? Am I reflecting on this the way Allah has commanded us to reflect on these verses, right? To ponder about them, to think about them when we're standing up or lying down or sitting. Are we reflecting on Allah and reflecting on these verses? And then the third thing that you can see is, okay, well, I am reflecting on the verses. I have a lot of open boxes. How many of those boxes are checked? Do I have good follow through? And I think if you do all 3 of those, you will start seeing transformation. How do I know this? We have so many examples of Sayyidina Abu Bakr, who was a man of action. So many examples of how he wasn't the kind of person who would just sit in the masjid all day, just making dhikr of Allah and just constantly just remembering and being more of that spiritual academic thing. His spiritual path was a path of action. He was a person who was constantly going out of his way before everyone else to take care of the needs of other people. I can give you two classic examples of that. The first example is, and again, I'm paraphrasing here because I'm just kind of ad-libbing this session here, is the example, the narration where the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is meeting with the companions at the morning prayer at Fajr. So this is like before daybreak, right? And they're, after the prayer and so forth, the Prophet, peace be upon him, says, how many of you are fasting today? And Sayyidina Abu Bakr raises his hand and he says, how many of you have fed someone today or done this or done that? And he starts naming all of these things that usually people would do maybe over a month, fasting, visiting the poor or the sick, taking care of people, providing food, etc., etc. All of these actionable, unchecked boxes that it might take you a week or a month, or for some of us a year to do, or years. And every time he asked something, Sayyidina Abu Bakr was raising his hand. That early in the morning, he had already checked this stuff off early morning before people are still getting up. So Sayyidina Abu Bakr was a man of action. That was his spiritual path, as I understand it. He was out there acting on the verses that he would pray on at night. As soon as he was up in the morning, he was out there checking off boxes. Because for him, his spiritual path, his journey to excellence was through action, not through just recitation and academic understanding and analysis and all that. And that wasn't him, as I understand it. Another very good example of that was in the earlier period of the Seerah. After the death of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, there's an incredible story that's narrated by Sayyidina Umar. So it's not a hadith, it's a narration by Sayyidina Umar. And there's a link I will put below where Sheikh Umar Sulaiman does a great job recounting this hadith. But I'll just give you the gist of it. The leader of the Ummah, who is Sayyidina Abu Bakr, every day after Fajr, he would just take off and he would leave Medina, walk out of the center of Medina to the outskirts. No one knew where he was going. And then he wouldn't come back until after, the sun had risen and so forth. And this was a daily habit. He wasn't the kind of person to just sit in the masjid and chit-chat or, read Qur'an and stuff like that. He would be out. And this is the leader of the entire community. And so one day, Sayyidina Umar is trying to figure out what is going on. Like, what is he up to? Where is he going? And so he follows Sayyidina Abu Bakr as he departs the masjid. And Sayyidina Abu Bakr doesn't know this. And he sees that Sayyidina Abu Bakr goes far out of Medina and he goes inside this hut. And he's in the hut for a while. And then, I don't know, maybe an hour later, several hours later, he leaves the hut and he makes his way back to Medina. At this point, Sayyidina Umar is completely confused. What is going on here? So he goes to the door of the hut. He knocks on the door and he inquires about what's going on in there, who's, the owner of the hut. And this old lady comes out who's blind. And he asks her, do you know who's coming in there to take care of you? What's going on here, basically? And the lady says, look, I'm an old blind lady and I'm taking care of several orphans. And so he says, well, do you know who this person is who's coming in every day? And she says, oh, that's an unnamed person who doesn't reveal his identity to me, but every day he comes in and he takes care of me. And, and according to the narrations, you can hear it in the link below.
لا يذكر لي اسمه أبدا. He never once shared his name with me. He never bothered to tell me his name. Umar radiallahu anhu said, well, what does he do? قالت جزاه الله خير. She said, may Allah reward him. Every morning he comes. Listen, by the way, she details it. She says, he cleans my home. He washes our clothes. He grinds our wheat. He bakes our bread. He cooks our breakfast. And then he leaves. Subhanallah. Think about that. If this was the only narration we had about Abu Bakr, it's incredible. Seriously. The leader, the head of the ummah, the khalifa, the most important man in the ummah right now, with his station, with his status, and he goes out every morning to this house, and he doesn't even tell the woman what his name is. He's just consider me a secret fa'il khair, right? Just some good doer. Washes the clothes, cleans the house, grinds the wheat, bakes the bread, cooks the breakfast, and then makes his way back to govern the ummah. That is absolutely incredible. Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu says, every single day? Like, is this really what he does every single day? She said, every day. May Allah bless him. Umar radiallahu anhu said, do you pay him anything? She said, nothing. Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu started to cry, and he said, أَتَعَبْتَ الْخُلَفَاءَ بَعْدَكَ يَا أَبَا بَكْرِ. You have exhausted every successor of yours, O Abu Bakr. You've exhausted us. Anyone that comes after you is exhausted. Because this is a standard that is impossible for us to meet.
Sayyidina Umar is just overwhelmed because he was just so action-oriented, and he was so oriented towards serving humanity. He was an action-oriented person. Our understanding of the companions is that very few of them actually memorized the entire Qur'an. Maybe a handful of them had actually memorized the entire Qur'an, because, it was a new thing that was coming down. It was coming down and not its compiled order. So, it was a challenging thing to memorize the Qur'an at that time. And it's perhaps easier now because we have this book, it's compiled, we have schools that teach it and so forth. But back then, it was more challenging. And certainly we understand that Sayyidina Abu Bakr did not have the entire Qur'an memorized. But he acted on everything. And it reminds me of a very powerful quote that I'm probably going to butcher because I always have to just pull these out of my mind. But I read a quote earlier this year, which I've always kind of pinned in my mind because it's a very powerful quote. A lot of us tend to feel happy about how far we've gotten into the Quran. Oh, I'm on the 13th juz. I'm on the 17th juz. Oh, I know all of Surah Al-Baqarah. I know the 30th juz by heart. And I saw this reminder that said, it's not as important about how deep you are into the Quran. It's really about how deep the Qur'an is inside of you. And that's kind of what I see when I see Sayyidina Abu Bakr. And that's why I'm talking about this journaling plan today, because I think if you follow my lead on this and just trust me on this, it's actually a lot of fun and it is hard work. If there's any reason that people will not follow my guidance on this and do this, it's going to be because they're going to realize that they actually have to do some heavy lifting. And nothing that's worth it comes easy in life, right? Everything that's worth it requires a lot of hard work. If you're going to learn a new language, it's just a lot of hard work, a lot of flashcards, a lot of thinking, a lot of forgetting, a lot of headaches. If you're going to get in shape, it's going to be a lot of sore shoulders and muscles and some icing off your knees. Same thing with transformation. Personal transformation is hard work, but it's the most valuable endeavor of all. So I highly suggest you try this Qur'an journal. If you have any tips or tricks that I've left out, let me know what you think. I have other things that I like to do with my Qur'an journal, but I'm just trying to keep it very basic for you right now. Maybe I can give you some other tips as we move forward in this series. But again, I highly recommend that you please try this. Go out, get a nice journal too. Don't get some cheap thing. Get something nice, because this is the Qur'an and this is your life, and so you should treat it with respect. You should be excited about this journal. You should be excited about setting it up. And now you can walk around with this journal wherever you want. And you can, if you're waiting to pick someone up at the airport, you can flip through your action plans. You can flip through the Qur'an, and it's your Qur'an. It's not something that you can't, write in or you feel bad highlighting or checking off. It's your, quote, copy of the Qur'an personalized to your life. And I think we need to go back to this means of making the Qur'an the center of our life, something that we hold, something that feels tattered and used and worn and explored and discovered. So that's basically the end of this episode. I just want to introduce to you this idea of Qur'an journaling. In the next episode, we're going to start diving into the first earliest Meccan surahs, and we're going to begin with Surah Al-Alaq. So, thanks for listening to this. I know this was a little bit longer, but I want to kind of get that all off my chest, explain to you how I proceed with the Quran and how I think it might be very beneficial for you. So anyway, feel free to share this with anyone who you think might benefit from it. Would love to hear your comments below about what's working for you with this episode particularly. And can't wait to see you guys in the next episode. We're going to start diving into the Quran. I will see you guys soon. Assalamu alaikum.
إن الذين قالوا ربنا الله ثم استقاموا فلا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون أولئك أصحاب الجنة خالدين فيها جزاء بما كانوا يعملون.